This is Fresh Air. I'm David Bianculli, sitting in for Terry Gross.
You really have no idea what's going on, do you? Do you think it's coincidence you're being here? That boy was just the beginning.
Oh, why can't you people just leave me alone?
Because you are the Slayer. Into each generation, a Slayer is born. One girl in all the world, a chosen one born with a
strength and skill to hunt the vampires, to stop the spread of their evil blah, blah, blah. I've heard it, okay?
I really don't understand this attitude. You've accepted your duty. You've slain vampires before.
Yeah, and I've both been there and done that, and I'm moving on.
That's Sarah Michelle Gellar and Anthony Stewart Head from the very first episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, a TV series that aired for 5 years on the WB and is now in its second season on another broadcast network, UPN. The show and the character were created by Joss Whedon, who's a very busy guy right now. He's got Buffy, its spin-off series Angel, still on the WB, and a new sci-fi show called Firefly, which is trying to build enough of an audience to succeed Friday nights on Fox. That's 3 shows on as many networks. I spoke with Whedon back in 2000, when he only had 2 shows on the air, but even then, he was working long hours and taking that work very seriously. Viewers put off by the silly Buffy the Vampire Slayer title, or by genre dramas in general, may still be unaware of what they're missing here. Buffy, for example, is full of metaphors about how loved ones can turn into monsters, how high school and college life is a particular type of hell, and how everyone, to some extent, is haunted by his or her demons. Characters grow, change, sometimes even die. When I talked to Whedon, I began by asking him what he had in mind when he crafted Buffy, his first crack at creating a weekly TV series.
The character of Buffy has grown a lot. I had always imagined I would take her on a pretty long journey. I didn't realize exactly how far we'd go. I didn't realize how far the actress could go when we first started. I knew that I wanted somebody who had to deal with the responsibility of this great weight, this burden of being a Slayer, and that would help her to grow up as a person. But I didn't know, until I worked with Sarah for a while, how far she could take it, how deep she could go in terms of the grief she could experience and the growth and the intelligence she would bring to it.
Did you know what you wanted to do in terms of this TV series, having come from places like Roseanne and doing movies and stuff, what you wanted out of a TV experience?
Well, what I wanted was to create a fantasy that was emotionally completely realistic. That's what really interests me about anything. I love genre, I love horror, I love, action, I love musicals, I love any kind of genre, and Buffy sort of embraces them all, but ultimately the thing that interests me the most is people and what they're going through, and that's why I loved Roseanne, that's why I wanted to work on it. Because it was the only sitcom I felt was genuinely funny and also very real and very kind of dark. And that's what I wanted to bring to this.
There's one thing I'm really curious about in terms of your work, and that's if you see it, what you're doing every week in Buffy is writing different chapters of a novel. That by being in control, because you spend so much time reflecting on past history of the characters and past things that they've done, if you're careful about the sequence and if I'm correct in presuming that you allow ramifications to spread on down the line with what these characters do from week to week.
Well, I'm very, very much aware of it as being like a novel. The only equivalent to what you can do with a soap opera on TV, to me, is, what Dickens was doing, and he happens to be my favorite novelist. The idea that you can get invested in a character for so long and see it go through so many permutations is fascinating to me. The shows that I've always loved the best, Hill Street Blues, Wise Guy, Twin Peaks, have always been shows that did have accumulative knowledge. One of the reasons why the X-Files started to leave me cold was that after 5 years, I just started yelling at Scully, "You're an idiot! It's a monster!" And I couldn't take it anymore. I need people to grow. I need them to change. I need them to learn and explore and and die and do all of the things that people do in real life. And so we're very, very strict about making sure that things track, that they're presented in the right way. Because ultimately, and this is one of the things that I did find out after we had aired, the soap opera, the characters, the interaction between them is really what people respond to more than anything else. And although we came at it as a sort of monster of the week format, it was clear that the interaction was the thing that people were latching on to. So we were happy to sort of go with that and really play it up and really see where these characters were going to go. So now it is very much a continuing show, and we're always aware of that.
Let me ask you about how you get into position with the WB to turn a movie that at the time was 4 or 5 years old into a weekly series.
Well, Gail Berman went to work at Sandollar, and who had the rights to Buffy and very much wanted to turn it into a TV series. And when she approached me, and I thought about, the idea of telling horror stories about high school, since high school was pretty much one long horror story in my life, I thought that's actually a series that actually makes sense. That's interesting to me. So we developed it, and then the WB just right away, we pitched it to a couple of places. Fox turned us down. NBC, I don't even know why they asked us to come in. And then the WB got it right away, and my biggest fear was that they were going to say, make it stupider, make it lighter, make it fluffier, take away the edge. And in fact, they very much encouraged the dark side of it.
Now, is it unfair to ask someone who creates all of these characters if there's one that you either relate to more or have more fun writing when you drop into the various skins?
I have fun writing I love to write all of them. And part of that comes from the actors, because their voices are so unique that the more I know them, the more, like I started to write Willow the way Allison spoke, as if throughout the first season, because she has such a particular cadence, and she and Nikki are both so witty. It's of the characters that, Spike is always going to be fun to write, because he's always going to have the meanest opinion about anything. And therefore, he's always got a good attitude. He's never just going to be there and be sincere and give exposition. He's always going to put a spin on something. As far as who I relate to, Xander was obviously based on me, the sort of guy that all the girls want to be best friends with in high school, and who's, kind of a loser, but is more or less articulate and someone you can trust. That part wasn't like me, but the rest was. And I also sometimes identify with Giles, particularly when I'm working, and I feel like I'm supposed to be the grown-up in this insane group of children who are not paying attention to me when we have this mission, which in my case is to create this show. And but I also went to English boarding school, and so knew a lot of Gilesy people, so he has a particular resonance for me.
When you build this show, even though it was set in high school, when it came time for them to graduate, you allowed them to graduate and then moved on to a different venue in terms of college. Number one, is that a reaction against, the AARP card-carrying members of Beverly Hills 90210 and that sort of thing? And is it just the idea of the ongoing Dickensian story that you want to tell?
Yeah, I wanted to do the next thing, and that sometimes I thought, I wish I could have kept them in high school a little bit longer, but it would have started to look silly. I did make one compromise. I had Oz repeat a grade because I wanted him to be there for Willow, and he had ostensibly already graduated, so that was my one cheesy maneuver. But I really felt like, yes, I want to keep them in high school, and that's probably the way they feel. Yes, I'm worried that college is going to be, different and not as cool, and we won't be as popular as a show, and that's what they'd feel. The important thing is always to match whatever your characters are going through to whatever you're going through as a creator to what the audience is going through. When people worried about how are you ever going to give Buffy a boyfriend after Angel, how are they ever going to get over each other? Well, that's exactly what Buffy was worried about. That's exactly what Angel was worried about. It's taking the challenges, it's taking the fears that you have, and letting everybody go through them, because ultimately everybody always does.
And then you also get the metaphors as well. When she goes to college and has a roommate from hell, it pretty much is a roommate from hell.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, there wasn't anybody I know who didn't say, oh, yeah, that was me. Everybody thought that was based on them.
Whenever a program is not set in regular present-day normal stuff, everything from Star Trek to Bonanza, those shows are able, if they want to to talk about certain issues at the time or to get away with some things that they can't otherwise. And I'm wondering if, while the title of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and the idea of monsters in some respects may make it a little harder for you to get respect from the Emmy community or something else, does it also make it easier for you to tell certain stories or explore certain ideas?
Absolutely. It makes it easier. Star Trek dealt with a lot of issues, that other people weren't dealing with. As I said before, Buffy's not really an issue show. It's more emotional, but it allows us to get into some very hairy emotional places week to week in a way that you just couldn't with a normal show. You'd think your characters were schizophrenic. When you have the fantasy, element of, oh, here's my evil twin, you can really examine another side of a character, and you can go to a very dark place if you want to. You can kill people off, you can bring them back, you can do all these things, you can put everybody through intense emotional paces, and that emotional realism is the core to the show. It's the only thing I'm really interested in. But when you have just a normal show, you can't really take them to that many different places without it just seeming very fake. It's like, soap operas, it's like, who's going to get kidnapped today? You can only do that so many times. But when your show is structured around a genre show, horror or fantasy or science fiction, then you have, great license. What we don't have, which is what some science fiction shows have, is we can't just do a thing because it seems cool. Everything that we pitch, everything that we put out there, whether or not it works, is based on the idea of the audience has been through this. A normal girl goes through this. A normal guy deals with this. It's issues of sexuality, popularity, jobs, whatever it is. It's got to be based in realism. We can't just say, the warships come and they, they transmogrify, they blah, blah, blah. We can't do that. We can go to some pretty strange places, but at the start, we always have to be about how does the audience relate to having done this themselves? That's why when we aired Innocence, when Buffy slept with Angel and his curse went into effect and he became evil again, I went on the internet and a girl typed in, "This is unbelievable. This exact thing happened to me." And that's when I knew that we were doing the show right.
All right, let's listen to a clip from Innocence. This is the episode where Angel becomes evil.
You got a lot to learn about men, kiddo. Although I guess you proved that last night.
What are you saying?
Let's not make an issue out of it, okay? In fact, let's not talk about it at all. It happened.
I don't understand. Was it me? Was I not good?
You were great. Really. I thought you were a pro.
How can you say this to me?
Lighten up. It was a good time. Right? Doesn't mean like we have to make a big deal.
It is a big deal.
It's what? Bells ringing, fireworks, a dulcet choir of pretty little birdies? Come on, Buffy. Sound like I've never been there before.
Don't touch me.
Should have known you wouldn't be able to handle it.
Angel! I love you.
Love you too. I'll call you.
Death is a subject Whedon tackles often, but one of the things he does from time to time in Buffy and in Angel is to kill off very important characters, like he recently did with Buffy's mom and Willow's girlfriend, Tara. I asked him why he does that.
Well, I do it because I want to keep people afraid. I want to keep people in suspense. I want people to understand that everything is not perfectly safe. The problem with doing a horror show on television is that your main characters are coming back week to week, and you don't really care about, somebody who just showed up for one episode. So, every now and then you have to make the statement, no, nothing is safe. And that's a very effective way of doing that. If somebody objects, if somebody says, how could you kill that character? You have to bring that character back. You have to bring that character back. I know I've done the right thing. If they go, oh, they're dead, then I killed the wrong person because nobody cares. One of the things that people always shy away from is killing a sympathetic character. When I worked on Speed, there was a character who died, a lawyer that Alan Ruck played, and I took out the lawyer. He was a bad man. He was terrible. He was causing trouble, and he ended up dying. And I turned him into a likable sort of a doofy tourist guy. And they were like, well, now we can't kill him. And my opinion was, well, now you should, because now people will actually care when he dies. But nobody wants to kill a good guy. It makes them twitchy, particularly on a series. And we're very careful about it, because if there's somebody we know we're going to want for future episodes. But it does inflame emotions sometimes. But that is, in fact, what I'm trying to do.
When you talk about the flexibility and the versatility, that's also definitely true of the co-stars, and just about everybody who appears in the show. And I'm wondering, you came to Angel as the spin-off and to David Boreanaz's character, but you could have gone, it would seem, with a half dozen of them and spun off. How did you decide upon Angel?
Well, I have always been of the opinion that any one of these guys could sustain their own show. I think they're that good, I think they're that interesting, and I think they're that pretty. But Angel became the logical choice for a few reasons, and that was clear early on. One, he is, like Buffy, bigger than life. He, for the first couple of seasons anyway, was the only superhero on the show in the sense that Buffy was. He had something more. Now, Oz became a werewolf, Willow became a witch. Everybody sort of had something to make them more than they'd been, but at the time everyone else was a normal mortal, whereas Angel was kind of a bigger-than-life character, and if people responded to him like that, then he was going to have a kind of heat that would certainly make the network interested in making a show about him. I also knew that the romance between Buffy and Angel could go so far before it became incredibly tired, and we found interesting ways to shake that up. Obviously, the moment she slept with him, he turned evil, which, as I was saying before in that episode, Innocence, was a huge benchmark for the show, but ultimately, there were only so many variations we could play, and so it made sense to give him his own.
When you talk about the resonance of characters and keeping the history going, back in the episode of Doppelganger, I guess a couple of seasons ago now, there was a reference made to Willow, Allison Hannigan's character, as, at least in this other existence, having a bisexual sexuality, and that supposedly, based on the doppelganger rules, that might mean something on this real Buffy world. And I was wondering how the decision was reached to go that way.
Well, the arc between Willow and Tara has kind of a long and sort of tortured history. We had thought about the idea of someone exploring their sexuality, expanding a little bit in college, because that's felt like one of the things that might happen in college. Since we tend to work inside metaphor for most of the show, we talked about Willow and her, being a witch, because it's a very strong female community, and it gives her a very physical relationship with someone that isn't necessarily sexual at first. And then when we decided to go that way, part of it was because Seth Green wanted to step out and do movies, and we knew that he was going to be out of the picture, and we had to do something with Willow, and it seemed like a good time for her to be exploring this. Then the question just became, how much do we play in metaphor, and how much do we play as her actually expanding her sexuality? And you're walking a very fine line there.
Now, when you do these major moves for your characters, the story meetings that you have with the other writer-producers, how far ahead are you working? What's your Bible like, or whatever it's called?
Generally speaking, I come into a season with the arc for the season, the main villain, the main sort of journeys for each of the characters, where are they going to go, and some benchmarks, certain episodes, somewhere around episode 10 this has to happen, somewhere around episode 15 this has to happen. We have to keep it flexible, because you come up with better ideas, or an actor falls out, or something happens. The process of creating TV is entirely fluid. You always have to be ready to be thrown a curve, and in our case, every time we have, I think it's helped us out a great deal. But at the same time, you must have a bigger plan, both emotionally and structurally, because I make each year on Buffy work as a separate arc. I did that with the first season because I didn't know if we were ever going to air again, and I absolutely hate a show that ends in the middle before everything's over. It drives me insane if the story isn't finished. So with Prophecy Girl, the last episode of the first season, I finished the story, and if we had never aired another show, it would have still been a self-contained unit of 12 episodes that told a story. So that's how we designed every year.
Joss Whedon recorded in 2000. He's the creator of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and co-creator of Angel. His new show is Firefly. A Buffy cast album of the musical episode Once More with Feeling has recently been released, and the third season of Buffy will be out on DVD in January.